Tortured warriors unearthed in France. Ancient mass grave of mutilated warriors unearthed in France. 6,000-year-old rituals of torture, sacrifice, and triumph revealed. Archaeologists in northeastern France have uncovered a chilling Stone Age mass grave that has remained hidden for more than 6,000 years. The site, dating between 4300 and 4150 BC, contained the skeletal remains of at least 82 individuals who appear to have met brutal and ritualistic deaths in the aftermath of violent conflict. Now, it's time to dig into this one. Let's break it down on the AI podcast.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're unearthing something truly astonishing and pretty unsettling, actually. It's a chapter from prehistoric Europe, a discovery that really challenges how we picture life 6,000 years ago. Forget those simple ideas of just Stone Age survival. We're talking about practices so grim, so calculated. They show a complexity in early human societies that, well, few would have expected. We're diving deep into a recent find in northeastern France. It's a mass grave dating between 4300 and 4150 BC. That's old. And it contained the skeletal remains of at least 82 people. But honestly, the number isn't even the more shocking part. The evidence paints this chilling picture of systematic torture and mutilation. So our mission for this deep dive is to explore these findings. We want to reveal the brutal realities of prehistoric Europe and these elaborate rituals of triumph that seemed to shape warfare back then.
It's absolutely fascinating, isn't it? Because this discovery just turns our understanding of the Stone Age on its head. We often think of primitive life as harsh, sure, focused on survival, maybe with some, sporadic violence. But this site, it shows a level of social organization, symbolic thinking, even strategic intent that's profound for that era. It forces us to look beyond that simple story of early human life and to grasp these more sophisticated, sometimes frankly terrifying aspects of their culture, including what you might even call early forms of propaganda.
Propaganda. Wow, that's a strong word for 6,000 years ago.
Okay, let's get into the specifics of this find then. It is chilling. So archaeologists uncovered this mass grave, right? Hidden for millennia. You said 4300 to 4150 BC. I mean, just to give people context, that's way before the Egyptian pyramids, like 1,000 years before the wheel was even common. And the scale, 82 individuals minimum. That's not just a small fight, is it? It points to something pretty significant. It's a large event.
Oh, absolutely. The time frame itself, smack bang in the middle Neolithic period in Europe, that's significant. This was a time when things were getting more complex socially. You had early farming communities starting up. But what really makes this discovery stand out, and it connects back to your point about propaganda, is the clear evidence of deliberate things done to the bodies, either around the time of death, what we call perimortem, or just after, postmortem. Mass graves from this period, especially with such unambiguous signs of, let's say, intentional violence beyond just killing, they're incredibly rare. This isn't just a burial pit. It's, like you said, a detailed historical document etched in bone. It gives us this unparalleled and, disturbing look into the culture and conflicts back then. It tells us about a society that could carefully orchestrate what happened after a battle.
A historical document etched in bone. Yeah, that really paints a picture. And what that document shows is deeply unsettling. The conclusion is shocking. These victims weren't just killed in the heat of battle. They were subjected to systematic torture and mutilation. So what exactly did the researchers find? What details on the bones led them to that grim interpretation?
Well, the team published their findings in Science Advances, and they cataloged a range of just horrific injuries. Many skeletons showed blunt force trauma to the skulls, so direct fatal blows. But what really marks this site as different are the patterned, non-random acts of mutilation. It wasn't chaotic. They found evidence of severed arms, dismembered hands, shattered lower limbs. The precision of it all is unnerving. It suggests a deliberate process, not just a frenzy.
Severed arms, hands, shattered legs. I mean, it sounds like something out of a horror movie, not archaeology. What on earth could lead to injuries that specific, that deliberate? What kind of thinking or maybe ritual could be behind that sort of calculated cruelty?
The expert interpretation gives us some really disturbing answers. It definitely moves beyond simple wartime violence. For many of the warriors, it looks like their legs were deliberately broken, probably to stop them escaping before they were killed. And then they were brutalized further. Just imagine the control, the psychological aspect, the symbolic degradation in that act alone. It wasn't just about stopping an enemy. It feels like it was about stripping away their dignity, their agency, even before death, and certainly after. And then there's this evidence of piercing holes through some of the burns. The suggested function for that is particularly macabre. It possibly means their bodies, or maybe just parts of them, were mounted for display. Just think about that. Human remains, put on public show, maybe as a gruesome warning to outsiders, or perhaps as a symbol of power within their own group. This is where you start to see that idea of early propaganda really taking shape. A visual, visceral message of dominance and terror. And those severed upper limbs, the researchers think they might have been collected on the battlefield. Maybe brought back to the settlement to be transformed, used symbolically, or put on exhibition. It's a level of calculated post-mortem handling that's far beyond just killing. It suggests a really ingrained system of beliefs and practices around war.
Right, so definitely not a spontaneous outburst of rage. It's organized, intentional. It points to a deep system of power and terror, like you said. But why? For an ancient society, what's the actual motivation for such specific, elaborate brutality? What purpose does it serve beyond just, winning the fight?
That's the crucial question, isn't it? Why this specific ritualized brutality? The experts suggest these acts were part of elaborate victory celebrations, or rituals of triumph. Dr. Teresa Fernandez Crespo, she was one of the lead researchers analyzing the site. She put it like this: "We believe they were brutalized in the context of rituals of triumph or celebrations of victory that followed one or several battles." So it suggests these acts weren't just about ending lives. They were about asserting dominance, instilling fear, maybe solidifying the social order in their own community, and absolutely terrifying enemies. It's a kind of psychological warfare, really, designed to break the will of anyone thinking of resisting and reinforce the power to the winners. It's not just about land, it's about controlling minds.
That definitely adds a strategic, even psychological dimension to it all. But you mentioned asserting dominance, instilling fear. How effective is that kind of message in societies without, mass media or writing? And were all the victims warriors? Were they all treated the same way in these grim rituals? Or did maybe who they were matter in terms of their fate?
That's a really good point about communication. Without writing, these public displays, these trophies, it would have been incredibly powerful. Direct, visual statements of power, understood immediately by anyone who saw them. Fear and respect could spread just by word of mouth, based on these displays. As for the victims, well, interestingly, not all the remains actually showed signs of mutilation, which implies that while some were definitely tortured and displayed, others might have just died in the fighting and were put in the pit, or maybe they represent different social categories entirely, not just captured warrior. Differentiating them is meticulous work, obviously. Archaeologists look for patterns, age, sex, any evidence of previous injury suggesting they were fighters, or skeletal markers indicating maybe hard labor, or the opposite, a less strenuous life. The fact that you have individuals without mutilation alongside those who were severely brutalized is key. It suggests a hierarchy, where different people met different ends based on who they were or their role.
So yeah, we could be looking at warriors, but also captives with different statuses, maybe even people punished as outcasts from their own group who ended up there. This variation points towards really complex social structures and belief systems back then, much more nuanced than we might first think.
The idea of outcasts or different types of victims, that adds another layer, doesn't it? A pretty somber one. But thinking beyond just battle and triumph, what about maybe a deeper motivation, more spiritual? You mentioned another theory that this pit could represent collective sacrifices. Can we explore that a bit?
Yes, absolutely. The idea of collective sacrifices adds another profound layer. And it's not necessarily totally separate from the rituals of triumph concept. In many ancient societies, warfare and religious belief were deeply intertwined. So perhaps these deaths were seen as an offering, a way to appease gods, or maybe symbolically cleanse the community after a conflict. Some cultures believed sacrificing enemies, or sometimes even their own people, could ensure good harvests, or success in future battles, or just keep the cosmic balance right. The very ambiguity between straightforward triumphs and sacred sacrifice just highlights how incredibly rich and, yes, sometimes unsettling the belief systems of these ancient Europeans must have been. It paints a picture of a world where the spiritual and the brutal weren't separate things. They were tangled up, each reinforcing the other. The lack of detailed burial rites for many of these victims, combined with how extreme their injuries were, can suggest a purpose beyond just getting rid of bodies.
A world where the spiritual and the brutal were intertwined.
That's a powerful image. And if we look at the victims themselves, you mentioned clues about where they came from, like evidence from their teeth suggests some might have originally been from the Paris region. That's quite a distance from northeastern France. But it's more complex than that, right? Chemical traces in their bones hinted at wider movement, too.
Exactly. Zooming out, that mobility aspect is another critical piece of the puzzle. It tells us these conflicts likely weren't just small local skirmishes between neighboring villages. we're seeing a dynamic landscape, interactions and probably conflicts between different groups across pretty significant distances. People were moving around, territories were being contested, and these interactions, sadly, often turn violent, with these elaborate rituals triumph or maybe sacrifice playing a major role afterwards. It really underscores the fluidity, the constant negotiation of power in this ancient world. It was a world of interconnected communities, even if they were often antagonistic. It wasn't static at all. It was a vibrant, dangerous, constantly shifting map of human movement and interaction. Okay, so let's try and summarize what we've unpacked in this deep dive. This ancient mass grave in France, it reveals a picture starkly different from any simple view of the Stone Age. We're not just talking survival. We're talking sophisticated, organized, often brutal societies. Societies engaging in complex rituals of war, triumph, maybe even sacrifice. It really challenges our standard ideas of what primitive societies were capable of, doesn't it? For you as an archaeologist, what's the biggest takeaway from seeing this level of organized violence and complexity so far back?
For me, the biggest thing is how it just completely flips our assumptions about where organized violence comes from. We tend to associate this kind of complex, ritualized brutality, this psychological warfare, with later states and empires, right? More civilized societies. But here, 6,000 years ago, we see clear evidence of sophisticated planning, symbolic actions, social layers that made these horrific events possible. It forces us to really reevaluate how we understand early human behavior and the very roots of organized violence and maybe even propaganda. It really shows that human nature, with its capacity for both incredible creativity and profound destruction, has a very long, very complex history. It reaches back much further than many people might have thought. It tells us the seeds of our most complex and sometimes darkest social behaviors were sown incredibly early on.
Right. And so this deep dive brings us to a pretty stark realization. The Stone Age was far more complex and often, far more brutal than maybe our modern view allows. We've looked at the chilling discovery of that 6,000-year-old mass grave, the undeniable evidence of systematic ritualized mutilation, the interpretation of these acts as elaborate victory celebrations or maybe collective sacrifices, and the insights they give us into the social dynamics and surprising mobility of Stone Age Europe.
And it raises that important question, doesn't it? What does it really tell us about human nature? That such elaborate, brutal rituals with clear strategic and symbolic goals existed so far back in our history. And it makes you think, how much more about these ancient societies is still hidden, still waiting to challenge our current ideas, pushing us to look beyond simple stories and embrace the full, often uncomfortable richness of our past.
Exactly. When you think about the depth of planning, the symbolic meaning behind these ancient acts, it really makes you wonder what other rituals of power, display, maybe even terror might still be buried out there, still waiting for us to find them and completely rewrite how we understand our earliest ancestors. We're clearly only scratching the surface of their stories, and some of those stories are incredibly dark and incredibly complex.
Okay, one question for you. If Stone Age societies glorified torture and victory, what does that reveal about human nature in times of war? Don't forget to comment it. Thanks.